feel like I need to hydrate for this video. All right, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think this is one of the harder videos I've had to make just because I don't really know what to say about the new M2 Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pros. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. We finally have hit a point with the new MacBooks to where they're so good that this is now just kind of a performance bump. There's really not a whole lot of new features that I can point to and say, yes, that is definitively better. And also, I've only had this machine for 24 hours now, and I got it yesterday along with the M2 Pro Mac Mini, which by the way, wasn't an easy video for me to make either because I'm so sick of doing benchmarks and things like that, but it was a good way to establish a kind of a baseline of where we were at with that. I consider that kind of a new product because there wasn't a Pro or Max chip in the first iteration of Apple Silicon Mac Minis, and so that was a different case. But with this one, it's gonna be kind of the same as the last one, except Apple indicated a 20% improvement in both CPU and I believe a 20% in GPU. And yeah, that's really hard for me to measure that out without doing a bunch of benchmarks. And if I've only had this computer for a day, I can't really explain to you if I'm noticing any improvements. But what I can do is kind of answer some of the questions that people might have right now, which I'm guessing are questions that a lot of you have in efforts to maybe decide whether or not you're going to buy this machine. And so we put it out on Twitter to let me know what you guys were thinking about these new M2 Pro and M2 Max. I said M2 Pro and M2 Max, but I primarily have the Max, but I think I can kind of formulate an opinion based off of my time with the M2 Pro Mac Mini and just kind of adjust for this form factor. It's gonna be kind of the same performance levels, and so I'm primarily focused on the Max because that's what I had before. I had a 16-inch M1 Max. This is a 14-inch M2 Max. And also we put it out on YouTube, so some of the subscribers might have gotten a notification or saw it in their subscriptions feed, the same question. And so I'm gonna pick some questions, I'm going to answer them, but I'm also going to go over some of the things that I had questions on. Primarily, is Wi-Fi 6E noticeable? No, it's not, and that's not bad. I mean, these Macs were consistently getting the faster speeds out of anything that I had in my house. I tested my phones, laptops, other things, tablets, anything that I could do a speed test on, I did. And I have a Wi-Fi 6E router. It's from Google. It's the Nest Wi-Fi Pro, whatever it is, 6E. This is more of a future-proofing upgrade. And so, yeah, I mean, it's consistently one of the highest things that I get, but like noticing on a day-to-day basis, again, I've only had it for a day, but like noticing any faster no, I mean, normal use, it seems fine. So another thing I was thinking about was the HDMI port, but let's primarily go over the ports in general. So on the left side, you still have your MagSafe. You still have 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports and a 3.5mm headphone jack. Then on the right side, you have your 2.1, your HDMI 2.1 port, another Thunderbolt 4, and a SD card slot. And so really the only noticeable difference with the HDMI is, well, it can power 8K monitors. And I don't have an 8K monitor, but I do have an 8K TV. And so here's a clip of me plugging it into my 8K TV. Okay, so I have the MacBook Pro. This is the M2 Max. It's plugged in. I had to remove the PS5, but it's plugged in, barely hanging by a thread here, to my Samsung TV. This is an 8K TV. And as you can see here, I'm gonna switch over in just a second, but we have 3840 by 2160 as the default, and we can go to 7680 by 4320. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that. And boom, everything's tiny. There's 8K for you. So yeah, definitely works. Super tiny. Bluetooth 5.3. Does it in fact work better with some of these other devices that are kind of garbage with Bluetooth and Macs? The Mac Mini, the M1 Mac Mini had some really bad Bluetooth issues. The Mac Studio that I use on a daily basis has some pretty bad Bluetooth issues. I couldn't tell if it was the product or if it's the Mac, but I'm pretty sure it's the Mac. One thing I can point out is the made for Mac Logitech keyboard and mouse. Specifically, I'm using the mechanical MX Mini and the this is the what is this? The Logi MX Master 3S for Mac. And these primarily run on Bluetooth. You cannot use the little dongle adapter, which would cut out any issues that I've had. But this one specifically is Bluetooth only. And so I tested it on here, and I've noticed it's brief, but in my testing, it's flawless. Like it one of the main things with this is that it takes a couple of keyboard clicks for the keyboard to register and kind of wake itself up and connect to Bluetooth, which is severely annoying. And then with the MX Master, the mouse, it is kind of the same thing. It lags behind. It's real jumpy then, and it like tries to catch up, and it's just not great. And I'm assuming that's Bluetooth. And so when I connected it to this, it actually works really, really well. Did a typing speed test, and I think I did pretty well with it. And yeah, I mean, I like it a lot. And so that is something that could be a huge boost. And another thing that I didn't really pick up on video, but my audio engine speakers that I use with my M1 Ultra Mac Studio, it cuts in and out constantly. And it's not all the time, but when it does, it's like I have to turn it off and turn it back on, reconnect. I have not, in the day and a half that I've been using this new MacBook, had that issue. That's still something that's kind of early, so maybe check back in with me. You can hit me up on Twitter or Instagram if you'd like, and I could let you know, or in my review later on down the road when I can properly test this computer as my daily driver, then I can properly update you on that. But so far so good with Bluetooth issues. So those were the things that I wanted to kind of test right off the bat, because those were the newest things that I could point to and say that's new. Obviously there's a performance bump, but I haven't been able to notice anything crazy right now without doing benchmarks, but just in real world use, it feels like a really fast MacBook, which is what my M1 Max was, a really fast MacBook. But let's get to your questions. And by the way, I guess before we proceed, I haven't notified you what Mac this is. Again, this is the M2 Max MacBook Pro, but this is the one with 32 gigs, and it is the one with a terabyte of storage. I believe this is the base level M2 Max version, just like my M1 Max was the base level M1 Max with 32 gigs of RAM, and I believe it also has a terabyte of storage. Actually, it's right over here. Let me double check that because I'm not totally sure. So yeah, 32 gigs of RAM. Okay, and then definitely I know it has a terabyte of storage. But yeah, so let's move on to some of the questions that you guys had on Twitter. How does it compare to the original M1 Pro? That is not a good one to start with because I did not have the M1 Pro. I had the M1 Max. So I don't know, but I'm guessing it's 20% better. Again, if you are someone out there who's thinking of upgrading from an M1 Pro to an M2 Pro, don't do that. Save your money. Unless you're going from M1 to an M2 Max or M2 Pro, and your M1 configuration is just not cutting it for you, and you're thinking that it's just you got a base model and maybe you need a little bit more performance, then yeah, I can totally see that. You could even do like a used M1 Pro or M1 Max and save probably some money, or refurbished ones and save some money. So if you're coming from any of the Pro Max Apple Silicon already, do not upgrade to this. This is not something that you need to do unless you need the 8K HDMI output here, or you really want Bluetooth 5.3 and you really want Wi-Fi 6E. Then I guess those are three things that the other computer just doesn't have. Temperature checks, please. No trickery. I heard they run hot. I don't notice them running hot at all. I have not installed any thermal management stuff. I guess I could, but honestly, just the field test, it is completely cool. I think I've said this a million times in my other videos on the M1 Max. I've never heard the fans. I'm sure they've kicked on and they're just so quiet. I have never heard them. I've never noticed it. It's never made a peep. This one so far has not made a sound. I have not done a whole lot on it. So I will answer this question back in a month or two when we do the full review. How about that? Go over any write speeds, if any different. I'm guessing you mean the SSD, and that is something I do want to test because I did the M2 Pro Mac Mini video where I did a bunch of benchmarks. Again, you can check that out here. And there was a pretty big difference. But if you're wondering about like the slower SSDs, I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. That's more for the base model, 256 gig that has the 1 NAND versus the 2. I don't anticipate there being a huge difference here, but let's actually check because I am curious. So I'm going to open up the Blackmagic disk speed test here, and let's run that. In that video, I actually ran it yesterday, so I'm not going to do it again, but it was, let's see, it says it was 4843 for the write speeds and 5213 megabytes per second for the read speeds, which is crazy fast. So let's go ahead and do this here. Wow. Okay. So for the write speeds, we got 5944 and 4877. This one just again did it, and it topped out at 6,000, and again at 4857, another 6,000. So doing this here, we're actually getting significantly faster write speeds at over 6,000 each and every time. And then over here, we're getting for the read speeds over 4,800, about 4,850 to 60 every time. And so that's pretty crazy here. If you want to see my screen, you can see well over 6,000, and then over here over 4,860. So I mean, that's pretty nuts. So if you're wondering if they're any slower, according to this test, it doesn't seem like it. It actually seems like the M2 Max is actually faster. This is again the 1 terabyte model compared to the other M1 Max MacBook Pro 1 terabyte model. I do not have anything with 256, so I can't tell you, but yeah, seems to be so far so good. People are talking about battery life and asking me about battery life, and I'm just going to point you in the direction of what Apple says, and this is what it says on its website. Apple stated that you're going to get about 1 hour better than you would versus the M1 Pro and M1 Max. And then, of course, it just depends, I'm guessing, on the size. So if you have the 16-inch, you're going to get a little bit more battery, but this is the 14-inch. I haven't noticed any major differences one way or the other in terms of battery. It's a pretty good MacBook for battery life. It was one, and it seems to be the same. So battery life is still excellent on these machines in the early stages. Someone asked me 32 gigs or 64 gigs of memory for photography. I'm guessing they use Lightroom and Photoshop. Yeah, that's what's okay. So Lightroom and Photoshop. If you can swing it, always do 64. I mean, that just makes sense, but I think you'll be fine with 32. I've got 32 on most of my machines. I've run Photoshop and Lightroom at the same time with Safari open and other applications open, and it has been just fine. So you can get away with 32, but if you have the budget to get 64, I mean, obviously it's not going to hurt. I heard performance falls off because of the SSD at smaller sizes like the M2 Air. Is that true? Again, I don't know for sure, but my guess is you're talking about the 1 NAND versus the 2 and all of that. And this is not the base model, so no, performance actually seems to be better as we just tested the SSD. All right, and this last question I'm actually pulled up from YouTube here. So someone said, with limited budget, is it better to get 32 gigs on the 10-core base model of 14-inch or to get the 12-core version with 16 gigs for video editing? So basically asking me if GPU and CPU bump is better than RAM, and honestly, I don't know how to answer that because technically if you're video editing, you want the best you can with GPU, but if you're someone who's not doing anything crazy in terms of, your video editing, if you're not running a bunch of, I don't know, noise removal plugins, and if you're not doing intense 8K timelines and stuff, it's possible that you can get away with that 10-core option and then bump up the RAM to 32 gigs because chances are you work in an environment where you don't just have Final Cut Pro open, you have other applications open, and if you're noticing that your memory is slowing things down, then it might be better to bump that up. But I mean, if you haven't noticed anything like that and you just want faster render and output times, and you might want to kind of, I hate to just sit on the fence, but it's gonna be an either or thing. I personally might go for the RAM just because I know how I work and I have a bunch of extra applications open, and you might want that instead. Yeah, so let me know in the comments down below what you think about these new Macs, and of course, I will catch you all in the next video.